Did you know that Pinot Grigio is a pinky grey-skinned mutation of Pinot Noir, which means despite having been comprehensively and decisively adopted by Italy as a brother grape from another mother grape, Pinot Grigio is very definitely French, hailing from Burgundy. Now, when it's in France, it gets called Pinot Gris rather than Pinot Grigio, but the two are in fact the same grape. Now, all of this is useful information because today's HanDrinksSolo wine info video focuses on Brampton's imported Delle Venezia DOC Pinot Grigio 2022. Delle Venezia DOC is an uncharacteristically large DOC, which is located up in the northeastern part of Italy and pretty much covers all of Friuli, Venezia Giulia, Trentino, and Veneto. DOC stands for Denominazione di Controllata, which means, in English, designation of controlled origin. Now, usually this control takes the form of certain rules that restrict how farmers can farm their grapes and how winemakers can make their wine. Ordinarily, these DOC rules are really about preserving the style of a rather small, quite specific geographical region, which might be the vineyards around a city or on a hill or in a valley. But the purpose behind the Delle Venezia DOC is just a little bit different. You see, until 2017, Delle Venezia was actually only an IGT region, or Indicazione Geografica Tipica. Now, the IGT regions are far less controlled. There's a lot more freedom for the grape farmers and the winemakers. But on the other side, there's also far less reliability when it comes to consumers being able to predict what will be in the bottle of an IGT wine. And I would guess when we think about Pinot Grigio around the world, this really reflects that IGT sort of situation. Because we know Pinot Grigio can be fairly basic. It often yields huge crop on the vines, and these huge bunches and huge crops can often lend themselves to kind of bland, kind of neutral wines. But as was the case with Müller-Thurgau in the same part of Italy, it was discovered that under certain conditions and in certain regions, the end result of a Pinot Grigio wine can be quite charming. But when the powers that be in Italy realized that with this gargantuan explosion of Pinot Grigio spreading around the world, it was in large part beginning to shape what people thought about Italian wines. What happened with Germany and Müller-Thurgau was that poor quality wine began to define Germany, and at one point Germany was known for little other than Liebfraumilch. Of course, the Italian authorities wanted to make sure that this didn't happen with their beloved cash cow Pinot Grigio, and so by upgrading it to DOC, they were able to create a fairly easily referenced standard for this runaway global success. The upgrade to DOC only happened in 2017, and in this demarcation they can make sparkling wines, but from 2021 they were also able to make rosé wines. And yet for all this, the vast majority of wines to come out of the Delle Venezia DOC are Pinot Grigio. So currently, the rules for Pinot Grigio Delle Venezia DOC are as follows. The wine must have at least 11% alcohol. It also needs to be at least 85% Pinot Grigio, but it can have 15% of Chardonnay or Friulano or Garganega, or Müller-Thurgau, or Pinot Bianco. And there's been another clever little restriction added in. We've mentioned before that Pinot Grigio can make huge crops, and when the crops are huge, concentration and flavor is at an all-time low. So the DOC stipulates that producers may only yield 12,600 litres per hectare of vineyards, as opposed to what used to be allowed at the IGT level, which was 15,200 litres per hectare, which is a 20% reduction. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a very generous allowance. It's far more than you might get from a block of commercially farmed Sauvignon Blanc in Stellenbosch, for example. But what it does do is removes that motivation for grape farmers in Italy to massively increase their tonnage regardless of the cost of quality. The vineyards that supplied the fruit for today's wine are in the west part of Veneto, so they're up in the hills surrounding Verona and Vicenza. Most of the vines are between 5 and 10 years old, so they're fairly young, and they're all trellised according to the GUYOT system. Now, for those of you who love spazzing out on vine training systems, the GUYOT system was invented by Dr. Jules Guyot in about the 1800s, and interestingly, given that we've been discussing how Pinot Grigio can dramatically overcrop, the GUYOT system is actually best suited to grapevines that have moderate to low yields. So now that we know what the label on the bottle is telling us, let's see what the wine in the glass has to say. Now, when we give it a sniff, well, we kind of see why it's become such a global success, because All the aromas are quite friendly. There's nothing there that's too intense, but it's all fairly pretty. We have lovely fresh cut apples on the fresher side of things, but then there's sweeter green melon and even a touch of lemon rind. And when we take a sip, the first impression is just how delightfully refreshing it is. As per the nose, we do have this lovely, fresh, tart, green Granny Smith apple note. And again, it's followed by sweeter green melon, which really balances that acid element out. And then towards the finish, there's also a hint of sweet lemon bonbon or lemon candy. So this wine is by no means a heavy hitter, but I think what we feel on the palate is that those DOC regulations have in some way managed to maintain at least some sense of weight on the palate. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. But if you have any questions, then leave a comment on the site and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. And if you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo YouTube channel, where we publish at least 6 videos each month talking about wine history, wine science, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars coming out of either the dynamic South African winelands or Italy.